Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor of Wastewater Digest. I am joined today by Mark Heinzer. He is Interim Administrator for the Wastewater Department for the City of Chattanooga. And we're going to be talking about the Moccasin Bend Wastewater Treatment Plant, the community it serves, some of the things they're doing at that plant, and especially how they earned a Department of Energy Efficiency Leadership Award for their work. So Mark, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, why don't you describe to me a little bit about this Moccasin Bend wastewater treatment plant? What's the community that you're serving? How big is that? What's your average and peak flows? All of that good stuff.
Sure, certainly. So we are a regional treatment facility. So the city of Chattanooga owns the main wastewater treatment plant in the southeast Tennessee region here in the Chattanooga area. But we do have 9 regional customers outside of the city limits that feed into our collection system, and we provide the wastewater treatment for all of those communities as well. However, the treatment plant and the city collection system it's all owned and operated by the city of Chattanooga, despite serving communities outside of its boundary. We have approximately 400,000 customers. The population-wise are and about 500 square miles of collection area, and our average daily flow is probably 70 MGD per day when it's not raining. We have a portion of our downtown area, the older part of the city, that is a combined wastewater collection area, about 4 square miles there. And of course, Chattanooga being an older city, we also have our share of I&I in the collection system. So during a rain event, our peak capacity at the wastewater treatment plant is 230 MGD that we can treat at the plant. So we have quite a variation in wet weather to dry weather flows. On a typical dry weather day, we might get 40 MGD, and then with the wet weather, we get 100 days of rain a year, depending on different levels, and it can jump up to 230. But if you average all that out, it ends up being around 70 MGD daily throughout the year. So,
what a tremendous amount of flow, and also just a tremendous geographical area you are covering with your facility.
It's a big area.
Yeah. So can you describe what the treatment process is at your plant? What are like the stages that you guys use? Are you an activated sludge plant? What's going on there?
Yes, we are. We're an activated sludge plant. We've got primary, you get primary clarification. We have we use pure oxygen and a UNOx system, and secondary clarification, and then chlorine disinfection at the back end. So that is the process that we have here. And again, since the variation in flow is quite a bit, we also have what we call the wet weather treatment train, which is it kind of bypasses the secondary settlement process, a secondary treatment process there, but it does get disinfected, and the effluent mixes in so that we've got primary and then disinfection on the wet weather side that will then mix in with the full treated side before it exits the plant. And the sampling happens after that. So again, trying to meet permit compliance with both the wet weather train we call, and then also the main treatment train.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way to handle that particular problem. But it makes sense too, because you have some areas that are combined, and then other areas that are not, it sounds like.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you recently earned this Department of Energy Efficiency Award, Leadership Award, actually. How'd that come about? What did you guys work toward? How did you get to that stage? What was involved in making that even come to life?
Yeah, so some of that predates my tenure here. However, I do know a little bit about some of that, and I can certainly talk about where it's headed as well. But I want to say it was maybe 2015 or 2017. I'm not exactly sure of the date it was conceived, but our monthly electric bill was around $300,000 per month, and it was one of our biggest expenses. And so the effort was made to try to reduce that, and there's a variety of things we did. The main thing that happened early on was we had earmarked part of our site for a solar installation. So we installed a 10-acre solar farm which provides, I think it's about 12% of our energy needs at the plant. So it's got the return on that investment is looking to be about 12 to 13 years. So after that, it will, all be we'll be in the black at that point, dollar wise. But it's been very, very good, for peak shaving and for just having a little bit of a backup energy source here at the plant. So it's a 4 megawatt system. And it's been, I think it was finally the keys were handed over to us in 2020, and it's been working pretty well ever since. And so that was the first thing that we did, and that kind of got the attention, I think, of DOE and others. And then more recently, we had another part of our facility was a filter press building for the biosolids handling. And that was also a very large energy consuming component of our process. And we were able to retool some of our other processes at the plant here to where we didn't need that anymore. And so we decommissioned that filter press building. It was about 20 years old at the time. And that also saved us tens of thousands in electricity bills throughout the year as well. We're still managing all the biosolids again by tweaking our other processes around that, and so that's been very helpful as well. And the last thing that we did, which we are under construction right now on this particular project, is because of our wet weather issues, we have an equalization, a 70 million gallon equalization basin on our campus, and previously we would have to aerate that entire 70 million gallons. So it's I think that's about 10 acres in size. To aerate a 10-acre pond is a very huge energy draw as well. So what we've done, we are now able to partition that into 4 equal quadrants, and we only need to, keep the one quadrant, aerated at a time. And then when wet weather comes, we can fill the other 3 quadrants at that point. And we would aerate it at that point. But by reducing that from a full 70 million gallons down to a quarter of that, as far as the aeration demand is going to be a huge benefit from a power consumption standpoint as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a tremendous amount of energy to aerate that much fluid.
It is, yes, for sure.
Yeah, wow. No wonder you guys had to really go after this pretty strictly. That I'm really curious about that solar panel element too. So you said that does that provide like a level of resiliency then for the facility as well, or is that more just for the bottom line at this point?
It does a bit. It's primarily bottom line at this point. It was installed, just to kind of defray the costs of energy. So we do have backup energy, power systems for most of our critical components. So we've got backup generators that we use if we need to. We got dual feeds to the plant, et cetera. So if one feed goes down from the grid, we have another backup feed. So we do some of those things for resiliency. The solar right now was configured just to defray some of that cost. Now in the future, we may be able to kind of partition some of that stuff off to where it's feeding directly to some critical components. Of course, solar being active pretty much during the daytime, you can't fully rely on it 24/7. So we kind of use it mainly as a cost benefit to us right now.
Gotcha. Well, where are you guys headed? It sounds like you have a lot of work that you're currently working on with this giant aeration pond, essentially. But what's kind of in the future beyond, looking forward and even further beyond that?
So the other thing that we are really trying to do, so right now when we have 6 digesters and we flare off the gas coming off those digesters, we really like to look into capturing that. We had a system years ago that would capture it. However, it's aged out and it hasn't been replaced. So one of the things we're going to do is try to look at doing more with that lost energy. In addition to that, we are looking at the biosolids treatment technology, a thermal hydrolysis process to help us generate more of that gas. So right now we generate a certain amount, but we're not digesting everything right now. But we hope to be able to feed a lot more of our solids into the digesters, get more of that gas out, and then use that in several ways. Maybe we can use that here at the plant to generate power here at the plant, or feed that into the gas pipeline grid for renewable energy credits, and as well. So those are two options that we're considering right now. But we're certainly going the route of the increased gas production and doing something with it. But as far as which path we take, we're still kind of in the decision phase of that right now.
Yeah, you got to weigh the pros and cons, benefits analysis, essentially,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
identify it. Very, very cool, though. I've heard of a couple of facilities that have done that. I believe even Downers Grove in Illinois was one that was very had popularized some CHP in Illinois, and was giving back to the energy grid as well and getting some of those credits too. So very,
Okay.
very cool. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's
Sure.
very interesting to hear about all of this. For everyone who's watching, check out the video description below. We have a link to a press release specifically about this Energy Leadership Award on our website. And once more to you, Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.